Welcome to the deep dive. If you feel like you're always overwhelmed, jumping from one task to the next, focusing so hard on that email, that goal, but you still end up feeling kind of drained. Well, that's the big paradox of attention we're tackling today. We're always told, focus harder, get sharper. But what if the real key isn't in the thing you're focusing on, the figure, but in everything you're ignoring? That whole backdrop, the ground that might actually be running the show.
That's exactly it. That's the core tension, really. We get obsessed with the specifics, the thought, the feeling, the task right in front of us, the figure, as we call it in Gestalt terms. But we almost never step back and look at the larger context, the field it's all emerging from. We grab onto this tiny fragment and think that's the whole story of our experience.
Right. So our mission today is sort of flip that script. We want to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this hidden structure of your attention, moving beyond just trying to focus better towards something, I guess, deeper, a wider awareness. We're exploring that fundamental link between what grabs our attention and, well, everything else. Okay, let's unpack this. Maybe start with the basics. Figure and ground.
Yeah, let's start there. Figure and ground, they're like the invisible architects of everything we experience. Let's make it concrete. Picture this scene. It's super common, almost painfully so. You're on a packed subway car, rush hour, and you're just zeroed in, scrolling on your phone.
Okay, yeah. Total sensory overload zone. I can feel it already.
Exactly. So that thing you're locked onto, the meme, the news headline, maybe a work email, that's your figure. Bright, demanding, right in the spotlight. And the ground, that's everything else you're actively pushing away to maintain that focus. It's the crush of people, maybe that low hum of the train, the stale air, the flickering light overhead you don't even notice consciously, the ache in your feet, all of it.
And we spend so much energy training ourselves to just block that out, right? Treat it like static. Ignore the noise, focus on the screen.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing the insight here is that it's not just static to be ignored. Why should I, waste precious attention on stuff I've decided is irrelevant?
Well, because the ground isn't passive at all. It's dynamically shaping the figure, constantly. It gives the figure its meaning, its emotional weight. Without the ground, the figure is just data. Think about context, like you said, a simple figure, someone yelling. Okay, put that yell in the ground of a football stadium, it's excitement, right? Put the exact same yell in the ground of a quiet library. Suddenly, it's alarming, aggressive. The figure didn't change, the ground did, and it changed your entire experience.
That makes total sense for external stuff. But okay, here's where it gets tricky for me. How does this work internally? Like, I'm just scrolling Instagram, feeling grumpy. I blame the algorithm or the content.
Right, perfect example. But trace the ground, that nothing you were ignoring on the subway. The pressure against your back, maybe it's making your shoulders tense up slightly. That tension constricts your breathing, just a little. The flicker of the light, even if you don't consciously register it, might be creating these tiny micro-stress signals in your nervous system. So you feel irritable, maybe tired, and you blame the content, the day. But the real culprit might be the internal and external ground you've tuned out.
Wow. Okay. So the irritation isn't just a bad thought I need to argue with or fix. It's actually growing out of this soil. The physical sensations, the low-level stress I wasn't noticing, maybe even unspoken assumptions about what I should be doing. It's like we're trying to fix the leaf, but the problem's actually in the soil it's growing from.
Precisely. We pour all this energy into fighting the figures, the anxiety pops up, fight it. The urge to procrastinate, fight it, that looping thought. But the root is often structural. It's sitting right there in the ground we've cut off from our awareness. So if fighting the figure doesn't really work long-term, what's the alternative?
So we've landed on the pause. But I think for most people, a pause means like stepping away, grabbing coffee, a quick break, a reset. How's the kind of pause you're talking about different?
It's fundamentally different. The Gestalt pause isn't just about stopping action, it's kind of perceptual revolution. The goal is to temporarily suspend the tyranny of the figure, to consciously allow the ground, all that stuff we ignore, to actually rise into awareness. We live in a culture that's just obsessed with figures, right? Goals, metrics, optimizing, fixing. We mistake that map of goals for the actual territory of our experience.
I remember you mentioning an experiment, like close your eyes for just 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And most people just say nothing happened.
Yes. And that's the big illusion we live under, that nothing is absolutely packed. It's saturated with information. The texture of your clothes against your skin, maybe the faint after image from the screen, your heartbeat, the hum of the room, that tiny tension in your jaw, it's all there. We just haven't been taught that this ground holds incredibly valuable information about our actual state.
So the practical shift here feels, well, pretty profound. Next time I feel anxious or stuck, instead of asking, what negative thought is causing this? Or
Yeah.
what do I need to do right now?
Exactly. The inquiry shifts, you ask. What's the ground underneath this feeling? What's the actual sensation in my chest right now? What posture am I holding? What sounds are actually in the room? And crucially, you don't try to change or judge these things. You just allow them to be perceived, let them into awareness. And here's the fascinating part. When you do that, when you notice the ground, the figure, that anxiety, that urgency, it doesn't always vanish instantly, but it changes. It loses its grip, its power to dictate your whole state.
It loses its tyranny
That's here.
because awareness isn't about drilling down harder on the problem figure. It's about expanding wider to see the whole context it sits in. You didn't necessarily change the thought, but you changed the entire field it was existing within. Is that right?
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this deeper layer, the field. The field is, well, it's the total constellation of forces present in your perceptual now. Everything. Temperature, light, the pressure of the chair, that faint hum from the fridge you weren't noticing, a flicker of memory, tension in your jaw, biological fatigue, even cultural narratives floating around. All of it operating together as one dynamic, unified, and intelligent system.
Wow, okay. That sounds potentially overwhelming to try and consciously track all that. If the field is that complex, how does our consciousness even create a stable, coherent experience out of it?
It manages because the field itself has this inherent intelligence. It's naturally self-organizing, which leads us to a key Gestalt principle called pregnance. It's often called the law of good form, or simplicity. Basically, your consciousness isn't just passively receiving data, it's actively organizing experience. It constantly seeks coherence, stability, simplicity, completion. It wants to form a good Gestalt.
Okay, so the field is trying to complete itself, find coherence. What does that look like in everyday life? How does an incomplete Gestalt show up?
Well, think about a recurring thought pattern. Maybe I should be further along, or I'm wasting my potential. Often that thought, that figure, isn't the core issue. It's more like the tip of an iceberg. It signals an incomplete Gestalt, some underlying tension or pattern in the field that's seeking resolution, seeking completion. For example, that I should be further along thought. It might not actually be about your career plan. It could be chronic fatigue that your system is mislabeling as personal failure. Or maybe it's an echo of a cultural pressure about progress that hasn't been fully processed. The system is trying to delete that pattern, but because we only stare at the figure, we miss the actual structure in the ground, maybe in the body. That needs attention.
Ah, okay. So trying to fix the thought directly, like making a more aggressive plan or trying to argue with the thought, is basically guaranteed to fail because you're just addressing this symptom. You're ignoring the root cause, which is this kind of unfinished business in the field.
Precisely. And so completion, in this sense, doesn't necessarily mean solving the problem in the way we usually think, like hitting a goal. Completion means allowing the ground to be seen, fully acknowledged. When you consciously scan your body, listen to the room, notice the background feelings without judgment, you give the field space. And often, the field then reorganizes itself. That charged thought might still be there, but it loses its painful emotional sting because the underlying tension, the incomplete pattern, was allowed to just be seen. It was allowed to complete itself in awareness.
And this connects to that idea of isomorphism, right? Which I find fascinating. This is just the structure of my inner world, my thoughts and feelings, actually mirrors the structure of my whole perceptual field.
Yes, exactly. Isomorphism. Your inner life takes the same shape as your perceptual field. So if your physical environment is fragmented and chaotic, or if your posture is habitually collapsed and defensive, your thoughts and feelings will reflect that same fragmented, defensive structure. It's almost a law of physics for consciousness. Wholeness, or what we might call psychological health, emerges not when we force our thoughts into shape, but when the entire field, inner and outer, is allowed to find its own natural, coherent organization. We mistake intense focus for clarity, but true clarity often comes from allowing the whole system to just breathe and settle.
This sounds like a very different flavor of mindfulness than what's often taught. Focus on the breath as the anchor, the primary figure to keep returning to.
It is different. In Gestalt terms, you could call this decentration. It's not about replacing one figure, like anxiety, with another preferred figure, like the breath. Decentration is more like field awareness. It's learning to hold the entire constellation, thoughts, sounds, sensations, memories, impulses lightly without grabbing onto any single element, without automatically privileging the loudest or most urgent thing. It's like stepping back from being the dictator of your attention.
Which leads us perfectly into this final, really big idea, the existential pivot. It feels like it turns everything we're taught about self-management on its head. We get all these messages. Control your thoughts, master your emotions, hack your habits. It all assumes we are the ones in the driver's seat, the CEO of consciousness.
And that, fundamentally, might be the core illusion we need to gently let go of. The pivot is this. You don't ultimately choose your figures. Your thoughts, your emotions, they arise from the field. They are products of the ground. But, and this is the crucial part, you can learn to choose your field. You can influence the ground. The figure emerges from the ground. So we're not the director pulling the strings. We are more like the space itself, the clearing in which experience unfolds.
Wow. Okay, that really changes the game. So if my thoughts are like leaves floating down a river, and the field is the river itself, the current, the banks, the gravity, the whole watershed.
You can't really control the individual leaves effectively, can you? If you try to grab every single one, you'll just get swept away, exhausted. But you can learn to read the river. You can learn to sense the currents, understand the flow, maybe even shift your position relative to it. You learn to belong to the current, not fight it. And the pause, that's the moment this shift, this surrender can actually happen. And yeah, it can feel terrifying, because without a figure to latch on to a task, a goal, a problem to solve, even an identity, that illusion of being in control starts to dissolve. And maybe, just maybe, that deep, habitual avoidance of the ground, of that feeling of no control, is the root of so much of our distraction, our grasping, our obsessions.
And the miracle, maybe, or the profound shift happens right there, when you actually do surrender to the ground, when you let the pause expand.
Yeah.
You don't fall into some scary void. You fall into presence. Suddenly, the hum of the fridge isn't annoying. It's just there. The ache in your hip isn't a problem to fix. It's a sensation. The light, the breath, the sounds, it all starts to connect into this single, living, intelligent whole.
Exactly. You realize the figure was never the main event. The ground, the field, was always the living system. You aren't just a thinker having experiences. In a way, you are the world perceiving itself through you. So clarity doesn't come from forcing a sharper focus. It comes from widening the lens. And peace doesn't come from silencing the mind, but from learning to listen to the entire field, just as it is.
So for you listening, the core takeaway here feels pretty revolutionary. Stop exhausting yourself chasing the figure, that urgent task, that nagging anxiety, that deadline. Instead, start practicing sensing the total field, the ground from which it's all emerging. This isn't just another self-help technique. It's really an invitation to a fundamental shift in how you perceive reality itself.
And maybe here's a final thought, something provocative to mull over. We've talked a lot about the power of pausing, of slowing down to sense the field. But what if we take it a step further? If the field truly is this intelligent, this self-organizing, what might happen if you stopped trying so hard to figure things out altogether? What if you experimented with letting the field itself, not your conscious will or your goals, determine what wants to emerge next?
The invitation then isn't necessarily to change what you're doing, but maybe just pause right now. Let your eyes soften a bit. Just allow the field, the sounds, the sensations, the air to breathe around you. So what does this all mean for your next moment, your next choice? Well, perhaps that's for you to discover the next time you truly pause.
You likely thought awakening or clarity or peace meant finally gaining control over your experience. What if it actually means learning to surrender that control? What else have you been unknowingly ignoring that is profoundly shaping the reality you experience every single moment?